All right, so get this. We're going to deep dive into Kari Lake.
Kari Lake.
Yeah, and her nomination to be the head of the Voice of America.
Oh, wow.
VOA.
Yeah, yeah.
And to do this, we got like a bunch of different sources. We got Wikipedia articles, we got some news articles, even some social media posts to like try to piece together
Interesting.
what's going on here. And it's not just a simple job change.
Right.
This is someone who went from like local news to like full-on political figure. And now she's potentially going to shape how America is seen by the whole world.
Yeah, that's quite a trajectory,
Yeah.
From what I've seen, like she started in local news, worked her way up to evening anchor at Fox 10 in Phoenix.
And get this, she interviewed Obama in 2016.
Oh, wow.
And Trump in 2020.
Huh.
Like, you don't see that too often.
No, not really.
It kind of shows she was in the mix politically, even back then.
Yeah, it is interesting because later on, her views seem to align a lot more with Trump's.
Yeah.
And it's around this time that she makes this pretty hard turn from journalism into politics.
Yeah.
Wikipedia even describes her as a champion of the far right.
Oh, wow.
Which is generally a term referring to those holding more extreme conservative views and a Trump candidate.
And it gets even more interesting when you look at her political history.
Okay.
According to Wikipedia, she switched parties a couple times.
Really?
Even donating to Democratic candidates before firmly landing in the Republican camp.
Wow, that's a journey.
Talk about a journey, right?
Yeah.
And that really kind of comes through in her 2022 campaign for Arizona governor.
Okay.
Her main message was that the 2020 presidential election was stolen.
Oh.
Which has been widely debunked, by the way.
Right, yeah.
She even demanded that Arizona's results be decertified despite courts finding no evidence of fraud.
So that refusal to accept the results,
Yeah.
even after multiple lawsuits failed, it seems to reflect this broader trend we're seeing of election denialism.
Yeah.
And it raises some serious questions about trust in democratic processes.
Wikipedia says she lost to Katie Hobbs by 17,000 votes. And she still wouldn't concede.
Wow.
It makes you wonder how that thinking might influence her leadership at VOA.
That's a really important question to consider.
Yeah.
Because the Voice of America has always been about presenting factual news to a global audience.
Right.
In over 40 languages.
Wow.
It's a vital part of American diplomacy.
Right. And if she's willing to challenge election results in her own country, could that approach kind of spill over into how VOA presents information to the world?
It's definitely a concern.
Yeah.
And her political stances themselves could also have an impact.
Yeah.
Take her views on abortion, for instance.
Okay.
Wikipedia says she's gone back and forth on her support for Arizona's 1864 law.
Really?
Which is basically a near-total abortion ban.
Oh, wow.
She was initially for it.
Okay.
Then against it after it became an issue for Democrats.
Yeah.
And then back to supporting it again.
Wow. That's some serious flip-flopping.
It is.
What does that say about her leadership style? Especially heading an organization that needs to present a consistent and reliable image of America to the world.
Well, it could be interpreted as a willingness to adapt to the political circumstances.
Yeah.
Or maybe a lack of strong personal conviction.
Right.
Either way, it's something to keep in mind.
Yeah.
As we look into how she might approach her role at VOA.
And her views on immigration and border control are another thing to consider.
Yeah.
In an op-ed that she wrote for the Independent Journal Review,
Okay.
she mirrored a lot of Trump's policies, calling for deportations and continuing to build that border wall.
That kind of stance could definitely influence how VOA covers those issues.
Right.
Will they stick to objective reporting or lean into promoting a specific agenda?
And then there's that whole controversy around her comments on drag performances.
Oh, yeah.
The Washington Post reported that she criticized drag, saying it could be harmful to kids, even though she'd been to drag events herself in the past. Yeah, it's interesting because this whole issue of drag has become like a real flashpoint in the debate about LGBTQ plus rights and freedom of expression.
For sure.
And Lake's position seems to have evolved on this too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the Arizona Republic even reported that she later clarified, saying adults attending drag shows is fine.
Okay.
And that her own daughter even attended a private event with a Marilyn Monroe impersonator who just happened to be a drag queen. So she's evolving on a lot of these hot button topics.
Yeah.
And it's making people wonder how these evolving views might shape the message VOA sends to the world.
It's a valid question, especially when you factor in her history of promoting the idea of widespread election fraud.
Right.
Even in races won by Republicans.
Yeah.
This was during her 2024 Senate run, which, according to Wikipedia, she ended up losing to Ruben Gallego.
She doubled down on those fraud claims even when Republicans were winning, which is, well, kind of contradiction, isn't it?
It does raise questions about her commitment to objective truth versus pushing a narrative.
And speaking of contradictions,
Yeah.
there's this recording of her talking to Jeff DeWitt,
Okay.
who is the head of the Arizona Republican Party,
All right.
where he seems to be hinting that, like, powerful figures are trying to keep her from running.
Interesting.
It's like something out of a political thriller.
It does add a layer of intrigue to her story.
Yeah.
On the one hand, she's promoting these unsubstantiated claims of election interference, but on the other, there might be these powerful forces working against her.
Yeah.
It's complicated.
It's very complicated. And just to add to the drama, Wikipedia even quotes her saying she'd be strapping on a Glock during the campaign.
Oh, wow.
Her rhetoric seems to have gotten a lot more intense over time.
It's important to acknowledge the potential impact of that kind of language,
Totally.
especially given the current political climate.
Yeah.
Words have real-world consequences.
Yeah, they do.
That kind of rhetoric can contribute to fear and mistrust.
Absolutely. So we've got someone who's gone from local news to a political figure known for challenging election results and making some pretty strong statements. And now she's been nominated to lead an organization that's all about presenting a consistent and reliable image of America to the world.
It is a unique situation, to say the least.
Yeah.
And the stakes are high.
Very.
If her leadership at VOA reflects these patterns we've been talking about,
Yeah.
it could have a big impact on how America is perceived globally.
That's a lot to unpack, and we're just getting started.
Okay.
Stay with us as we go further into Kari Lake's career and what her leadership at VOA could mean for America's voice on the world stage.
All right, I'm ready. Hashtag TTS, the Deep Dive episode 2024-12-11, part 2 of 3.
It's interesting how some of Lake's views, kind of track with these big shifts in American culture and politics.
Yeah.
Like her views on gender transition.
Okay.
The Arizona Republicans said she initially supported the right of individuals to transition.
But then she shifted to this belief that gender and sex are determined at birth.
That's a pretty big change.
Yeah.
And it really reflects those larger debates we're seeing about transgender rights.
Absolutely.
Which have gotten a lot more heated lately.
Yeah, for sure. And it makes you wonder how that kind of evolving perspective might influence how she covers those issues at VOA.
Right.
Will they, stay neutral?
Yeah.
Or will her personal views kind of creep into their reporting?
That's a good question, especially since VOA broadcasts to such a diverse global audience.
Right.
With different cultures and beliefs.
Exactly. And that's where her relationship with Trump becomes really important to consider.
Oh, totally. She's a big Trump supporter. I mean, she's even been called a Trump candidate.
Right.
And both Fox News and CBS News reported that her nomination came directly from Trump.
Yeah, and that connection is definitely there. Even in her acceptance statement on X, she specifically thanked Trump for his trust.
It makes you wonder how much her approach at VOA will be shaped by that relationship.
Well, if you think back to Trump's approach to media.
Yeah.
He was always fighting with traditional outlets, calling anything he didn't like fake news.
Oh, yeah. And remember what happened when he appointed Michael Pack to lead the U.S. Agency for Global Media.
Oh, yeah?
USAGM.
All right.
Which oversees VOA. CBS News covered that whole thing, and it raised a lot of concerns about political interference and attempts to control the narrative.
Yeah. Pack's time there was controversial for sure. There were people saying he was trying to turn VOA into like a mouthpiece for the Trump administration.
Wow.
Which really hurt their credibility and their reputation for being unbiased.
It's almost like history repeating itself with Lake's nomination. Could she be doing something similar?
It's definitely possible.
Yeah.
And it raises some red flags, especially considering her own history with these claims about election fraud.
Right. She even suggested there was fraud in elections that Republicans won, which doesn't even make sense.
It really makes you think about whether she's more committed to objective truth or just pushing an agenda.
And that's the worry, right?
Yeah.
VOA is supposed to provide accurate and impartial news to the world.
Exactly.
But if the leader is someone who maybe distorts the truth for political reasons, what does that mean for the future of VOA?
It's a big question and a tough one to answer, but we got to think about it.
Yeah.
We're talking about an organization that reaches millions of people around the world. It has a ton of influence.
And we can't forget about those Reddit posts we saw.
Oh, yeah, right?
People are really worried VOA could become like a propaganda machine under her.
Right.
Like OANN or
I
Newsmax.
can see why they'd be concerned.
Yeah.
Especially given, everything we've talked about in the current political climate.
Right.
We've seen how fast misinformation can spread.
Yeah.
And how it can be used to manipulate people.
It's a scary thought. VOA has always been a beacon of truth and objectivity. To see it turn into a tool for spreading propaganda would be a real tragedy.
It would be a huge blow to America's soft power.
Yeah.
And its ability to promote democracy around the world.
Okay, so where do we go from here?
Yeah.
We've talked about Lake's career, her political views, her connection to Trump, and all the concerns about her nomination.
Right.
What's the takeaway? What does it all mean?
It all comes down to this. Will Kari Lake, as director of VOA, keep the organization's commitment to being objective and unbiased?
Okay.
Or will she use her position to push a specific political agenda?
It's a question only time will answer.
Yeah.
But it has huge implications for VOA and America's voice in the world. Hashtag TTS, the Deep Dive episode 2024-12-11, part 3 of 3.
Yeah.
So it feels like we're kind of at a crossroads, On one hand, you have VOA's history of impartial reporting reaching millions of people around the world. And then you have Kari Lake, who's openly embraced, a specific political ideology.
Right.
And she hasn't been shy about questioning election results, even when her own party won.
It creates a lot of tension.
It does.
And some tough questions. Can someone with her background really lead an organization like VOA and still keep those core values of being objective and accurate?
And it's not just about being balanced in the news. It's also about what could happen, like a ripple effect.
Yeah.
If VOA starts leaning into a specific narrative, could that hurt America's credibility in the world?
Absolutely. VOA has always been seen as a reliable source.
Yeah.
Even by people in countries that maybe aren't on the best terms with the U.S.
Right.
If that changes, it could really hurt America's soft power.
Yeah.
And make it harder to promote democracy in other countries.
It's like what happened during the Cold War, right?
Exactly.
VOA was super important in fighting back against Soviet propaganda and giving people behind the Iron Curtain another perspective.
It played a huge role in shaping how the world saw the U.S.
Yeah.
That's why it's so important to protect VOA's integrity.
But then there's the other side that says America has a right to use VOA to promote its own interests and values.
That's true. Every country does some kind of public diplomacy.
Yeah.
The question is, where's the line between, promoting your values and just straight up propaganda?
And how do you make sure VOA's reporting stays credible and trustworthy?
Right.
Especially now when there's so much misinformation out there.
It's a tough balance.
It is.
And honestly, I'm not sure Kari Lake is the right person for that.
Yeah.
Given what we know about her.
It's pretty unsettling to think about.
It is.
We're talking about potentially changing how America communicates with the whole world.
And it all goes back to that big question we asked earlier.
Okay.
What does appointing someone like Kari Lake say about the future of American diplomacy and global communication?
It's a question we'll all be thinking about for a while.
Yeah.
And there's no easy answer.
It's a complex situation with big consequences.
Yeah.
But it's important to stay informed. Keep asking these tough questions.
Right.
And hold our leaders accountable for their decisions.
Well said, and that's exactly what we tried to do today.
Yeah.
With this deep dive into Kari Lake's career and her new role, which is definitely controversial.
For sure.
This story is still going on, so keep an eye on it and come to your own conclusions.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive into something important.